Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, my dear friends. Allah bless you all. Let's continue with our tafsir of Surah Al-Ra'd. Okay, Al-Fatiha. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Maliki yawmiddin. Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'in. Ihdina as-sirata al-mustaqim. غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد صلاة تفرحه وتسعده وترضيه واجزه بها عنا ما هو أهله يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم زدنا ولا تنقصنا وأكرمنا ولا تهنا وأعطنا ولا تحرمنا وآثرنا ولا تؤثر علينا وأرضنا وارض عنا يا كريم. So, Alhamdulillah, we looked at the beginning of Surah Al-Ra'd, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala started telling us about these tremendous signs that He's created in the sky, really, in what's above. And so Allah Azza wa Jal has created the heavens and the sky with all its mysteries and wonders and complexities, the galaxies, the nebulae, all of these things that inspire awe in the human heart, and people have been in awe of them since the beginning of humanity's time on earth. And just like that, there are things on earth that also inspire awe. So he moves from the celestial to the things that we can see on the land around us, but sometimes they may be missed, because not because people don't see them, but because people see through them, like that saying, not seeing the forest because of the trees. The same kind of principle, that you see the thing but you don't see that it's a sign of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So let's look at the next verse. وهو الذي مد الأرض وجعل فيها رواسي وأنهارا ومن كل الثمرات جعل فيها زوجين اثنين. We can read this a couple of ways, actually. We can continue it. وأنهارا ومن كل الثمرات. Stop, and that's a good place to stop. I'm going to Ibn Ashur and others. And then جعل فيها زوجين اثنين. But we can read it how I read before, and I'll explain both. And He is the one who spread out the earth and placed firm mountains and rivers upon it, and created fruits of every kind in pairs. Okay, so what does this mean? وَهُوَ الَّذِي, and it's Him. He is the one who spread the earth out. Let's read the rest, actually. يُغْشِ اللَّيْلَ النَّهَارِ, He covers the day with the night. إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَآيَاتٍ لِقَوْمٍ يَتَفَكَّرُونَ. Surely in this are signs, many amazing signs for the people who reflect. Okay, so what's happening here? So, وَهُوَ الَّذِي مَدَّ الْأَرْض, He's the one who stretched out the earth. And so what it means is, as we talked about last time, that rafa'a samawat, that he is the one who created the earth stretched. What does it mean? That the land, or the surface of the earth is not all hills and mountains bunched up everywhere. We have spaces, vast expanses, of land where you can walk, you can run, you can travel, you can build upon, you can grow things on, and it's not all just high cliffs and peaks and valleys. So it's an expanse. And then naturally, so this is part of it. You have to understand, Allah explains the Quran also from our perspective, how we would see it. Lest someone say, well, the earth's not flat. The Quran's not saying the earth's flat. Rather, He's saying that He's created it as an expanse. It's been stretched out. And if you look at any spherical object, if it's large enough, something like the earth, if it's large enough, when you're on its surface, it will look flat, right? Because the curvature doesn't appear. I believe when you're at sea, the horizon is 18 miles away from wherever you are, like the furthest point you can see, and then each mile another 18. Each mile you progress, then you got to add a mile on. It's like that. So I could be mistaken on the actual, but I believe it's 18 miles. And Allah knows best. And it's it's talking about, when the formation of the earth occurred, Allah made it such. So there are so many wisdoms, and we just look at the power required, for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to create things, create it like this. And yet at the same time, not every spot of the earth is the same, as we're going to see. And then he says, هو الذي مد الأرض, and Allah. So it's him alone. No one else has done it. It hasn't happened by chance. It hasn't just happened randomly, and it was meant to happen. No, it shows, all of these things show um, the will of a wise, omnipotent being is at work here, right? So, and there's one being, because there's order. Whenever there's multiple people trying to do one and the same thing, people differ, people argue, there's always conflict. So the fact that everything runs and works well, I mean, the biggest problem in how things are running on the planet are, through human actions, because humans are the ones being tested with free will. So they're the ones that do things right or do things wrong. Whereas the natural world works well. Look at any ecosystem, it's working well. So وهو الذي مد الأرض وجعل فيها رواسي, and he created it, and he firmly made within there rawasi. So from the word rusu, which means to be firm, firmly established, but the word rawasi is plural of rasia, and which is also the word used for anchors, because what does an anchor do? It weighs down the ship so it doesn't start floating away. So this is one of the miracles of the Quran. And there were people, up to 150 years ago, they were saying, no, this, the Quran's not right on this. Look, how can something be on top of the earth and still you call it an anchor? What they didn't get, that, there's the tectonic plates. And you have, when you look at a mountain, if you look at Everest, which is, say, 5 miles high, it's probably 50 miles deep, the range of mountains, the roots of the mountains that Everest, is the Himalayas, it's from. And so there's these huge chunks of rock that hold down tectonic plates. And if it wasn't for the weight of these things all over the earth, there'd be a lot more activity, a lot more volcanoes, a lot more earthquakes. But he's kept it like this, so there's a degree of stability. Yes, if people living near fault lines, there is some movement, and they are affected like this, and even that's a tremendous sign of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But but he's made it such a blessing. Can you imagine if you were to live in a place where there's constant tectonic activity, that would affect your daily life. Like, no structure would remain if there's constant earthquakes. But Allah made it as a blessing for us, that so our life here is easier. And so once again here he's addressing the mind with making you think and reflect on the reality of these things, so you can draw the conclusions that yes, he created everything. He is the wise, supreme, perfect, all-powerful God, and yet he's also speaking to your heart to make you see the blessings that he's given you. So you and humanity in general, we turn to him with thanks. And then he says, يُغْشِي اللَّيْلَ النَّهَارِ. He makes it's actually Arabic. No, sorry, we missed that. So then he says, وجعل فيها رواسي وأنهارا, and vast rivers. So a nahar, the root word actually refers to the trench that the water flows in. But then metaphorically you call the water flowing the nahar, the river, in Arabic. And the meaning has an implication of vastness, right? So he created these firm, solid mountains that stick into the ground, and he created rivers that are essentially trenches in the ground with water flowing. It's not firm, it's not solid, it's constantly in motion. And yet, like how many rivers come from mountains, like when the rain comes down, they flow from above, or whether it's caverns, underground water sources from within mountains, and that water finding its way outside. There's a strong connection between all of these things. And so he's saying that He's created mountains, and he created these tremendous rivers where there's food for human beings through it, fish and all sorts of other things that people eat. The water sources, fresh water sources, and he says womin kulli thamarat, and from absolutely every type of fruit that he's created on this earth. So he's created the earth vast for us to live on, stable because of mountains, yet there's motion in the form of the rivers and all the water they bring, and then that water is the source of a lot of vegetation to grow, and there's fruits, all the different types of fruits. You may not like passion fruit, but you may like mangoes. You may not like pears, but you might like kiwi fruit. There's so many different types of things. All of these, just the variety itself speaks to Allah's infinite knowledge. Like just the variety, and it's not just the variety, it's the difference in the taste, it's the difference in their textures, it's the difference in where they grow and how they grow. Summer fruits will grow in places, and and at times, like in the heat, watermelons will keep you cool, right, as opposed to like oranges grow in winter or in cold places, and they help keep you warm, and all of these things, and then just look at the nutrients that each type of fruit gives, and there's just so many benefits. There's too much there to say it's random. It just came, it just happened by chance. No, there's a specific plan here, right? And then, so that's one way of looking at it. And so he says, وَمِن كُلِّ الثَّمَرَاتِ جَعَلَ فِيهَا زَوْجَيْنِ اثْنَيْنِ. So you can stop at كُلِّ الثَّمَرَاتِ, and then جَعَلَ فِيهَا, he put in there زَوْجَيْنِ اثْنَيْنِ. So on earth, he put two genders, right? So all the animals and all the human beings, there's two genders biologically. This is what the Quran affirms. Not there's men and women, males and females, and it's this is how Allah's created everyone, right? So all the species reproduce, through through the two genders, and they perpetuate their species like this, right? This is one way of looking at it. Or you can stop at anhara, rivers, and you can say ومن كل الثمرات جعل فيها زوجين اثنين, and from all types of fruits he's made two genders. So how do you understand this? That's probably not the most eloquent of translations there, but how it means, this is something that the reproduction, right? And I know some people class it as asexual reproduction in plants, but there's some element that fertilizes the other, right? So in Arabic, you'd give it a gender, you'd assign it a gender. So this is something that the reproduction in plants, in biological species, it's been visible and observable for thousands of years, but it was only a fairly recent understanding, recent in terms of humanity's age, understanding, certainly not 1400 years ago, where they understood this. So you can also understand it in this way, and that's the beauty of the Quran. Allah presents things that allows multiple meanings, right? And then he says yughshi al-layl an-nahar, the night covers the day. So yughshi from ghashayan, it means to cover something entirely, to smother something, right? Similar to the way a blanket is pulled over something, right? And so he says the night covers the day, and essentially the day also covers the night, if you look at it, right? But he's put it in this beautiful way, because normally when you cover something, the thing that's covered is in darkness, so therefore it suits night. It's just a beautiful, nuances in the way the Quran presents things, really eloquent. And so he says, yughshi al-layl an-nahar. So how does this work? So Allah's presented it in a way where someone stood on the earth 1400 years ago, a contemporary of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, can understand it, or someone now, who's floating, in the ISS, watching the world beneath him, from space. It still applies in the same way. So what does it mean? So yughshi al-layl an-nahar, the night covers the day. So when the sun sets, so the sun will set, And what happens? The darkness will increase on the eastern horizon, and it comes over. So it's as though the day was here, and like the night is a blanket that's been pulled over until the sunset and all the twilight disappears, and night covers it all. So it's like the night is covering the day. But then if you look at it from the other side, if you look at where the sun's rising, so the sun's rising and the darkness is getting pulled away and the light is covering it. So both work. So this is an applicable description, and it's a description of how it's viewed, not necessarily how it happens, but how it's viewed. And you can also say how it happens as well. That also applies. And because we know that it's the earth spinning on its axis, and it's it's where it's positioning relative to the sun and what happens. And also from space, you can see this on the plane, when so they'll have an image of the earth, and it's a static image. So you'll see Africa, you'll see Eurasia, you'll see Europe, and you'll see the Americas. And then that static image, it just shows the darkness creeping over, starting from Japan, and moving all the way across. And then the same happens with light, and depending on what time of day it is and where you are. And it's tremendous. It's a beautiful, detailed, vivid description, and it's true. Whether it's it was heard by someone over a millennium ago, and whether it's someone today, reading it, it's really tremendous. And then he says, "Inna fi dhalika," indeed, in these tremendous matters, all of that mentioned before, they're all tremendous, they're all worth reflecting on, they're all worth thinking on. La ayatin, many tremendous, significant, powerful, moving signs that point to his existence, signs that point to his perfection, signs that point to his infinite knowledge, signs that point to his infinite power, his wisdom, his supremacy, his favor, his kindness. La ayatin liqawmin, for a people, yatafakkarun, who constantly reflect. Tafakkur is to reflect long and hard, to think of a matter. So do this. Take these verses, take these things, and go and reflect on them. So you think about one matter, and what does it imply? And look, how do I benefit? How do people benefit? And then it gives certainty. It puts certainty in your heart that yes, this is the truth. And so the qawm, these people, is part of their nature, and what defines them as a people, that they reflect. And also it shows that these people have great potential, and through reflection, it's one of those means that helps them achieve this potential. And then yeah, so the purpose of these verses is to encourage people to reflect and learn about the signs of Allah, leading them to the certainty in faith, as I said. Right. And so then he says, وَفِي الْأَرْضِ قِطَعٌ مُتَجَاوِرَاتٌ وَجَنَّاتٌ مِنْ أَعْنَابٍ وَزَرْعٍ. Is that what it is? Allah. Yeah. Oh, sorry. وَزُرُوعٌ. Yeah, there's a typo there. Sorry, no. وَزَرْعٌ. Yeah. وَجَنَّاتٌ مِنْ أَعْنَابٍ وَزَرْعٌ وَنَخِيلٌ وَصِنْوَانٌ وَغَيْرُ صِنْوَانٍ يُسْقِي. Okay. And on the earth there are different neighboring tracts, gardens of grapevines, various crops, palm trees, some stemming from the same root, and others standing alone. يُسْقَى مِنْ مَاءٍ وَاحِدٍ. They're all irrigated with the same water. Yeah. وَنُفَضِّلُ بَعْضَهَا عَلَى بَعْضٍ فِي الْأُكُلِ إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَآيَاتٍ لِقَوْمٍ يَعْقِلُونَ. Yet we make some taste better than others. Surely in this are signs for those who understand. Beautiful. Okay. So a qita' is a piece or part of something. So what's happening? He's saying, وَفِي الْأَرْضِ قِطَعٌ مُتَجَاوِرَاتٌ. And on the earth are pieces. So he's talking about different plots of land, different areas of land, mutajawirat, that are next to each other, literally jiwar, to be a neighbor, right? So there's one plot here and then a different plot here and a different plot here. We're not talking about plots like what farmers, measure out, for this is my land, that's yours, but actual, land areas. And so the point here is not that there's there's land and this is next to that, this piece of land is next to that piece of land. Rather, the point here is the difference. So some places you'll have a swampy, marshland, and in other places you'll have firm dry land. You go further away, you'll have, desert land. You go to other places, there's lush land where things grow, whereas they won't grow in the desert. And so the earth itself is so different. You go to some places and it's just snow that's been there for hundreds, if not thousands of years, frozen solid. You can't grow anything there. And you go to Alaska, for example, and then you go to other places, and it's just beautiful, lush green land. You can get water to come there. You can water it. You can grow things. You go elsewhere, and it's just marshland. There's just too much water, and you can't get rid of the water. And it's a sign in and of itself. If it was happening, why isn't it all uniform? Why is it happening in this particular way? And if, like, for example, if the temperature of the earth was a few degrees hotter or colder, right, increase it 20 degrees or decrease it 20 degrees, the whole the face of the the earth would be different, right? Land that may seem like a desert might not, it might start growing things later. So it just shows that there's variety, and variety doesn't happen automatically. It's planned. So the being behind it knows everything. He has a plan, and he's capable of making things different. So he says, "Wafil ardi." So there's these plots of land next to each other that vary, and wajannatun, and many lush gardens. Right, a jannah, the root word, as we said here, the root word is connected to something being hidden, right? But like the word is like there's lots of greenery and lots of trees, and there's a canopy, and the canopy of the trees hides what's beneath, right? It's densely covered from above. And so it just refers to any place where there is a lot of vegetation and density. And so there's min a'nabin, right, of gardens of grapes, and it's beautiful. Like I saw this in the Middle East. What they do is they'll put up a mesh over their garden, and then they'll wrap a grapevine over it in spring or before, and then when the grapes grow, it's like you're walking under this this canopy of beautiful grapes hanging down. It looks delicious, and it's really nice. Like, it's just pleasant to look at, really pleasant to look at. And then there's zara, crops of all different kinds of seeds, wheat, barley, millet, all these things people can grow, people can eat and benefit from. وَنَخْلٌ and palm trees. صِنْوَانٌ وَغَيْرُ صِنْوَانٌ. Sinwan is when you have a root of a palm tree that's separated at the top. So it's one root when it grows out of the ground, and then you get one trunk growing here and one trunk going there. You see when you've seen like really like inclined palm trees, curvy palm trees as opposed to straight ones. It's usually like this. So sinwan, that's what it's called. And ghayru sinwan, those that are just from one root and growing upwards. And so variance. And then he says, yusqa bima'in wahidin. All of these things are watered with one type of water. It's so beautiful. There's just one water. Whether you get it from rivers or whatever, H2O is H2O, right? And all of the different plants are watered by the same water, yet they end up different. And the fruits are different. The consistency of the trees are different, and the plants are different, and the fruit are different. وَنُفَضِّلُ بَعْضَهَا عَلَى بَعْضٍ فِي الْأَكْلِ. And we give superiority to some over others in fil akal. And akal here you can metaphorically understand it to mean in taste or in the fruit which is eaten, right? So you have strawberries, they taste very different to mangoes, and there's a size difference as well, and it's yet it's all come from water. So the rest of the element that's there, whatever is in whatever, we know like plants have DNA and all these things as well, but whatever's in there uh, has to have been made different. Now we know with the whole genome of human beings and plants, and how different and how similar they are as well. There's a being of absolute perfect knowledge and supreme power who's created all of this. It just can't be just random chance, right? It literally, it just doesn't make sense, right? There's so many things that, when you start adding up all of the, if you're looking at the probability of all of these things happening all by chance, just our solar system and where the Earth's positioned, and that the fact that there's giant planets like Jupiter and Saturn pulling away asteroids, keeping us safe, and all of this is just no, it's just not by chance. And then he says, "Inna fi dhalika la ayatin liqawmin qawmin ya'qilun." Indeed, in all of that are many, many signs for people who understand, who use their brains, who understand. Now, this is different to those who reflect long, deep, and hard. The qawmin yatafakkarun. These people, because this verse, what is alluding to, what is telling us, these differences and the conclusions you can draw from this are much more obvious. So he doesn't say it's for a sign for, in it are many signs for those who think hard, but just anyone who can think, which then conversely applies to, the idolaters and anyone who turns away from this, that you're not thinking. Those who don't see this are not thinking, like literally. And you see this, like you speak to a person and say, do you believe in God? No. Why? Evolution. Literally, that's the answer they'll give without thinking about it. And you say, okay, can you explain to me how evolution works and how evolution disproves the existence of God? And they won't be able to. Yeah, you might get a few here and there, right, who've thought about it, but do the arguments stand, and does it necessarily undo this? No, it doesn't, right? But most people, you ask them and they have an excuse ready, and they'll present it. Why? Because they don't want to engage with the reality of God. They don't want to engage with the implications of there being a God for whatever reason. Some people, it's just arrogance, and some people, it's a case of they went through difficulties in life and they didn't know why it was happening, and they just want to blame God, so they reject him. So there's various things, but the signs in these things that Allah has created, there are, they're evident, right? They're evident. That's what he's saying. And then so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what he does after proving his existence, he and his oneness and his supreme power and knowledge, he goes on to then criticize the pagans for rejecting all of this, right? So we look at that, but before that, we see that the signs here, summed up by some of the ulama, the creation of the heavens without visible pillars. We talked about the forces, the strong nucleic force, the weak nucleic force, electromagnetism and gravity, the subjugation of the sun and the moon for us, the earth being made fit for human life. Look at this blessing, right? Stretched out, and it's not, it's not difficult to even cross the terrain of the earth relatively, as opposed to if it was all just mountains. The mountains holding the tectonic plates, the rivers that benefit humans and plants and animals, everything being created in pairs. We talked about that. Our species, if you look at it as plants, that also appears. The alternation of the day and the night. And although technically this is something celestial, it's like the earth, how it's moving in space and how it's rotating on its axis. We're seeing it on Earth. That's why it's in the second group. The different spaces of land, the different types of vegetation and fruits, and the different types of trees. All of these things Allah's created. So there's this. So in the preceding verses, let's read this. Allah Most High establishes His power and wisdom by pointing to the signs in creation, such as the heavens and the earth. All of these. There is undeniable proof, right? And so someone who turns away from this is actually giving a really irrational response. And sometimes people, what they do is they'll give a response based on a pre-existing, response. But I mean, let's just say someone that says they're an atheist and they believe it's all random and everything. They haven't actually dismantled the proof of the existence of God, though, right? They just posited an alternative, which is unlikely, but in any case, but they haven't actually done anything with the existing proofs. So anyway, what can you say? All right. So then the next verse, he says, وَإِن تَعْجَبْ فَعَجَبٌ قَوْلُهُمْ أَإِذَا كُنَّا تُرَابًا إِنَّا لَفِي خَلْقٍ جَدِيدٍ أُولَٰئِكَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا بِرَبِّهِمْ. Now, if anything should amaze you, O Prophet, then it is their question. It is their question, when we are reduced to dust, will we really be raised as a new creation? It is they who have disbelieved in their Lord. وأولئك الأغلال في أعناقهم وأولئك أصحاب النار هم فيها خالدون. It is they who will have shackles around their necks, and it is they who will be the residents of the fire. There they will be forever. وإن تعجب. So it's an address to the Messenger of Allah, or another position, anyone who feels shocked, but the dominant position is that he's speaking to the Messenger of Allah, because the next verse also directly addresses the Messenger of Allah. So the second position is weak, but we mentioned it. Okay, so he says, وَإِن تَعْجَبْ, and this is really eloquent. Honestly, like the Quran, the beauty of the Quran, like when you understand it in the Arabic, it's just really tremendous. And the verse, this is one of those verses where it seems like a simple construction, but when you hear it and you feel it, it's like, wow, like what has this verse done to me? Right? It's just so, it's just, I'm really moved by this verse. Just the structure. وَإِن تَعْجَبْ فَعَجَبٌ قَوْلُهُمْ. And if you feel wonder, if you feel shocked, like you have someone, right, who feels wonder and shock at things. So wonder and shock appears at things when when you don't really like wonder, especially when you don't know the cause of something. Like, wow, what's making this happen, right? And but shock, like, how can someone do this? Like because your own morality doesn't agree with theirs. Like you wouldn't do that. How can they do this? وَإِن تَعْجَبْ فَعَجَبٌ قَوْلُهُمْ. If you feel wonder and if you feel shock, then what's really shocking is their words when they say this. Yeah, it's really quite eloquent in Arabic, honestly. فَعَجَبٌ قَوْلُهُمْ إِذَا مِتْنَا وَكُنَّا تُرَابًا. When we die and we are, so sorry, إِذَا كُنَّا تُرَابًا إِنَّا لَفِي خَلْقٍ جَدِيدٍ. And when we are, so let's just look at this. So this word kunna instead of sirna. So they're not saying when we become soil. So what happens? A person dies, you bury them, and then the body decomposes, and then it goes from where it is into becoming, soil, basically, right? You can't distinguish it from the soil. How long would that decomposed body have to be there before you disregard the body and only count the soil? Let's say 200 years, 300 years. So they're saying, so their focus is on when we are something that cannot accept life, that cannot be alive. And obviously they don't understand how Allah created the human beings in the first place. But he says, إِذَا كُنَّا, when we are soil, not when we've become. So when we are, like, after it's so long, you don't even think about the change, that occurred to bring them into this state. When we are soil, إِذَا كُنَّا تُرَابًا إِنَّا لَفِي خَلْقٍ جَدِيدٍ. Will we then be in a new form, in a new creation? Are we going to be resurrected and created once more? By human standards, once you've done something once, it's easier to replicate it. It just makes sense. But these people, it's completely, they don't even think that. And Allah isn't bound by our standards. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is absolutely perfect. He doesn't, doing something once or a trillion times is the same to him, right? It's just, effortless for him subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, this is what they're saying. وَإِذَا كُنَّا تُرَابًا أَيْنَا لَفِي خَلْقٍ جَدِيدٍ. So their focus is not on the fact that on the resurrection. The focus is that they don't believe that they can go through that change, that once we're soil, we're brought back into life, like we're recreated as we are now. That's what they weren't willing to admit. Yet there's signs all around. If Allah, who can create everything, and the things that He's mentioned in the previous verses, if He can do all that, He can recreate you, right, or human being. So He says, أُولَٰئِكَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا بِرَبِّهِمْ. Those low-based people, they're the ones who have rejected their loving Lord, this Rabb, their Lord, who created them and sustained them and gave them food and drink and shelter and clothing and well-being and loved ones and provision and comfort. The world was made with all these beautiful blessings and bounties for them. Those people reject this loving Lord and they turn away. And so most of the time, like we see in Surah Yasin, most of the time, people do this because of arrogance. Or a lot of the time they do it because of arrogance. So, and it seems to me like, Imam al-Bukhari hints at it as well, that, like when someone's arrogant, they turn their noses up, like they're better than someone. So he says, وَأُولَٰئِكَ الْأَغْلَالُ فِي أَعْنَاقِهِمْ. They are the ones who are going to have yokes. It's like a handcuff, but for the neck, in their necks, so it will force their necks up, right? A fitting punishment. It's also humiliation. They're turning away and they're rejecting all of these signs, the miracle of the Quran, the wording of the Quran, the perfection of the Quran. Turning away, they're rejecting the messenger, his miracles, everything. So, وَأُولَٰئِكَ أَصْحَابُ النَّارِ. And they are the companions of the hellfire. They're always going to be there. Hum fiha khalidun. So they're the companions. They're going to constantly accompany it. And he says they're going to be there forever. Why? Because they want to reject the truth forever. So they will have to, you don't punish a crime based on how long it took someone to do it. Right? If someone goes and murders someone in 5 seconds, you're not going to lock them up for 5 seconds and say, right, it's quits. No, the punishment has to be longer because of the severity of it. And these people, they would reject God, and, if someone went and, I believe in any culture, if someone went and spat on his mother and slapped her and kicked her and, beat her and insulted her and swore at her, no one would look at this person favorably and say, oh, he's a good person, or he's just misunderstood. No, like what this person's done is just so horrible. Yeah, there may be a background to it, but the good and the favors and everything that a mother does to a child, even at birth and just after, entails that she deserves more. At least you withhold, you restrain your harm, right? And so, what about the being that created them and their mothers and everything else that they have in life? It's really worth reflecting on that. So they turn away from Him. So we ask Allah for protection from this and to make us people who are completely and utterly grateful for the gift of having been created and existence and everything that comes on after that. Ameen Ya Rabbil Alameen. Okay, let's stop here and we will conclude this. Well, we'll continue. وصلى الله على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم والحمد لله رب العالمين.